Sydnee Shumaker, and for my psychology project, I'm going to be discussing the difference between a popular press article and then an academic journal article. And they were both on the same research topic, so it was very easy to compare, so I'm just going to go into it. We're talking about domesticated dogs and the wild wolves and the psychology behind the difference between the two. And so just to introduce the two articles, so the popular press is called Wired Dogs, so friendly, the answer may be in two genes, and was by James Gorman. And then the other article is the academic article, and that is called Structural Variants in Gene-Associated Human Burren Syndrome Underlies Stereotypical Hypersociability in Domesticated Dogs, and that is by Dr. Bridget M. Von Holt. And so right off the bat, you can obviously tell there's a pretty big difference between the two, just based off of the titles. I'm going to go a little more in depth into those. But just a summary, like I said, they are off of the same article, so they both cover the exact same thing, just in different formats. So the big difference here, what we're talking about, is there's a genetic difference between dogs and wolves that caused some behavioral differences, and the focus on this, or what they're choosing to contribute it to, is the gene difference of GTFTI, which is what wolves have, and then GTF2IRD1 is what the variants that dogs have. And I just thought it was super interesting because this article looks at the fact that this causes the difference between dogs and wolves, while if a human displays these same things, then it displays as William Burren syndrome, which the really big characteristics of this disease is the fact that they have hypersocial abilities, so they're very excited, they're very friendly, they're almost to the fact of over the top, and that's kind of what I picture, at least when I'm thinking of a dog. Like when a dog greets you and is so excited to see you, that's kind of the display and how it presents in humans. And so both of them, it covers the research, and the research it looked at 18 dogs and 10 wolves, and it looked at the social skills and the problem-solving skills to see if there was a difference between that because of the genetic difference. And so the next three slides I'm just going to kind of go over. These are comparing and contrasting to really get you to see the difference between the two. So the title, obviously, like I said right off the bat, the first one, it grabs your attention, it asks a question, and it also seems to give you a short solution by saying, oh, it only contributes, or here are these two genes, like read and find out. So it gives you something to really look at, and it's maybe looks to see like it would be a quick read. As opposed to the other one, obviously, I couldn't even fit the whole title into the slide, but the other one discusses how it's very long, it's very tedious to even read the title, it doesn't flow very well. So right off the bat, that's obviously not going to be something that you just read for leisure. The other one, the vocab, jump in your lap friendliness, that's obviously very informal, and that's kind of fun, easy to read, as opposed to single nucleotide polymorphism, which obviously, if that's not something you're familiar with, you're not going to understand this article very much at all. Length, there's 2 pages with large font and short sentence structure, as opposed to 12 pages that were very lengthy sentences, very hard to even read. You honestly forget what you're even reading about by the time you get to the end of the sentence because it's so long, so drawn out, there's so much vocab in it. So like I said, if it's not something you're familiar with, then it's going to be really hard for you to understand. It took me a very long time to even decipher so I can talk about what the article was about. And then the publishers are obviously very different. New York Times is read by so many people as opposed to Science Advances, which is more so for research purposes and stuff like that. So for the evidence, it was really it was very different once again. So the evidence for the popular press article, there were 3 people that talked about their evidence, and they really were just kind of saying that they agree with the title, they agree with the thing, they agree with what the article is about, as opposed to the other article, the academic journal, was 12 different people, and they all kind of had their own experiments, and they all had their own thing going on, but at the end end of the day, it was saying that they agree. It was just everything was very jumbled because they all had their own different thing going on. And they had differences in visuals as well. So the first one just had pictures of dogs, just made you smile, made you keep reading, as opposed to complicated, or at least in my opinion, complicated graphs and charts, such as this one right here. I don't really even know to begin what to tell you about this article, or about this chart, but if you don't really have the knowledge to understand it, then it's going to be not really something you can really understand unless you do more research into it. But so, since they were over the same research, the hypothesis was consistent in both of them. And so, lastly, kind of the comparing and contrasting of it is the arguments. So, the emphasis on results was quite different, like a lot of things are between these two. The popular press really only contributed to the fact that there are two genes, and that the two genes are the only reason, and that's the only reason things are different. And that's kind of, as you saw in the title, that's kind of what at least I was expecting from it. As opposed to the other one, since it is an academic article, it is built so much on the actual fact of the results. So that is very highly emphasized. And there were 99 different references, so obviously results are very high and are very important for this type of article. And then the credentials of both of the individuals, that obviously did make a difference. So for James Gorman, he is an editor for New York Times, as I mentioned, and his science background, while it may be more than the average person, it's not an incredibly high as opposed to the Dr. Bridget Van Holt, because his science basically is that he writes for the science column. He doesn't necessarily have a strong science background because he's writing for the people, he's writing for people to understand, as opposed to Dr. Bridget M. Van Holt. She has an extensive science background, so she has a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in biology, a doctorate in ecology, and a doctorate in evolutionary biology. So obviously that is much more science background than the average person, and you can definitely tell that when you're trying to read her work. So just kind of the final overall statement, do I feel that the academic article and the popular press well represent each other? Does the popular press get across what it needs to get across to the general public based on the other information? And I'd say it does. It definitely does get across the main idea of it, obviously not to the extent that the academic journal does. It's obviously much shorter, a lot different vocabulary, but for the most part I would say it does. I would say the big differences between the two are so heavily because of the fact that they're different publishers. And New York Times is obviously not publishing for the same audience that Science Advances is. All right, and here are my references. Any questions? Okay, thank you.